Set design. Let's talk about set design. So two ways that we really approach studio set design. Some studios are what we call soft studios. And a soft studio is where we would do TV shows that are maybe like once a week, once a month, or on some other type of infrequent schedule. Okay, so in a soft studio, typically what we do is we come in, we set up a set, we put up a set, okay, we do the show, and then we take the set down and put it away. Does that make sense? We just don't leave it up all the time. In a hard studio situation, what you have is a studio that's dedicated to a particular program. It's dedicated to a particular program in a hard studio, and this is what you're going to run into probably more frequently, okay, is a hard studio situation where the set and the studio is dedicated for a particular program. And so what happens in that kind of a situation is that the sets are much more involved, much more permanent in nature, and they tend to be a bit more expensive. Does that make sense? And so a lot of times what will happen is an outside contractor will be brought in. There are lighting and set design firms around the United States. As you might imagine, many of them are based in New York and Los Angeles, okay? But there's others. There's one in Boston that's associated with WGBH, in fact. But a lot of times what happens is an outside firm will be brought in, and then you're sitting in a conference room talking about what is it that you want. What is it that you want? And so the set designers in this way are kind of acting like architects, right? And they're going to try to come up with a few different designs that might work for what it is that you want and within your budget, and then they bring these different options back to you, and then you say, oh, okay, option 2 looks really good, and let's go ahead and go forward with that. Now, oftentimes, instead of just selling you set design, they're going to sell you set design, set construction, installation, plus the lighting package. So many of these outside firms, you know, that's what they do. And so the neat thing about this is, I think all too often students think, well, I'm going to graduate from college and I need to go to work for Channel 2 or Channel 3 or Channel 8. If I'm lucky, I'll get to go to ESPN or CBS or something like that. But you need to remember that there's a huge industry that supports the television industry. And so think outside the box. I mean, you could graduate and go on to work for a set design and lighting design company, and how interesting that would be. Rather than working at a particular TV station, you'd be doing work for a station in St. Louis, and you go out and you do an installation in St. Louis for a couple of weeks, you come back to your home base, design something else, and the next thing you know, you're in Florida doing an installation. I mean, that to me is more interesting. It's probably a little harder to do the whole family thing, but you know, it's when you're a young person and you're not tied down, you know, that might be an option that you might find appealing. So I want you to start thinking about these industries that are outside of the TV stations and outside of the networks that support the networks. Okay? Question?
So would a movie, like a movie set, be a soft one because you are only using it for a certain amount of time
and then taking it down, yeah.
And then something like a newsroom or something, would that be more permanent?
Yeah, a news set is typically the studio's dedicated to that, okay? Sports Center is a regular program, so they have a studio that's dedicated for Sports Center. Wheel of Fortune, Jeopardy, if you want to think of those things, those are permanent, right?
So the movie set would be a time where someone or like a company would come in and...
Well, a lot of times the movie companies are big enough that they're not contracting it out. They have their own set people, and they have their own set materials. and even locations in some cases. So for a movie, it would be a little bit different. A lot of times in movies, you know, they're going to shoot on location. Does that make sense? And so they have to pack everybody up and go to wherever it is that they're going to shoot. And they may, for example, let's say the movie's in a house, and they pick a house, they rent the house or lease the house, and then they'll come in and they'll modify the house however they need to actually do the shoots. Does that make sense? And more often than not, that's going to be an internal group that'll handle it. But again, I'm really speaking mostly to the TV side of things as opposed to the movie side of things. But most certainly, you know, there is a lot of episodic television, especially dramatic television, where the set is actually inside of a soundstage somewhere. And it's supposed to look like New York City, but it's not. You know, or I'm trying to remember, like CSI originally was supposed to be in Las Vegas, right? Well, yeah, they did some outside stuff in Vegas, but most of it was shot in a soundstage.
What about like Grays for like all the hospital scenes?
Well, you'd have to just look it up.
Is that one's a soundstage?
Some of it's probably a soundstage. Exterior shots are probably a real hospital somewhere, but it's probably not a hospital necessarily in Chicago.
Yeah.
Right?
It was Seattle,
Yeah, or Seattle.
Oh.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's
But yeah, it's just a hospital probably in downtown Los Angeles. You know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's actually really expensive to take an entire production group and move them to a particular place to do the shoot. Where does everybody live? They all live in LA. Does that make sense? The makeup artists, everybody, they're all in Los Angeles, and do they have husbands and wives and kids? Yeah. So it's really difficult to move people on location for long amounts of time because it's insanely expensive to do that. But they do, on occasion, do that. But it depends on the budget. One of the most famous cost overruns in history was Kevin Costner's movie Waterworld. Look that one up. They shot it, I think, in Hawaii, and the weather didn't cooperate, and they went over budget by tens of millions, and so the movie lost money. But anyhow, back to studio stuff. So you're going to have a pre-production meeting with a set designer, and you're going to the set designer is going to hand you something that looks like this. So these are some documents. These are real. These are not just made up. These are from our friends at Broadcast Design International out west, and they were working on a set for KNBC, which is also in Los Angeles. But this is what they came up with. This is the final. This is the final version. This does not show you all the different versions that they went into to get to this point. But you'll notice that there's 3 or 4 documents here. And again, these would be printed on much, much larger pieces of paper, okay? Not just 8.5 by 11 handouts. Sure. So the first one, if you take a look at this, this is a floor plan, and it's an overhead shot. It's an overhead shot of a studio, okay? But it's a floor plan. And if you really take a look at this thing, you can see lots of little notes, okay? And you can also see, do you see the circles with the little dots in the middle? The circles with the dots in the middle? A lot of times what those are camera placements. Those are camera placements. So as they are doing their design, they're trying to imagine where are the cameras and what can the cameras see. Does that make sense? So they're designing with the notion that, hey, this has to look good on camera, not just look good to your eyes. This has to work with the cameras. And so if you take a look here, you can see there's a news desk and some other things. But if you turn the page, there you get an overhead drawing. You know, this is what it's going to kind of look like. This is what it's going to kind of look like. It's a lot cheaper to do a lot of design work on a computer rather than building stuff, right? To make sure that the client is going to get what they want. All right, and then, so the very next thing, if you go to the next thing, it looks like it's real, but it's not. That's actually just a colored in rendering. That's a colored in rendering. And then the final page is an actual photograph of the finished product. Okay. Does that make sense? This is what it goes through. And this will be constrained, constrained somewhat by the budget. I remember Salt Lake City, it would have been right around, oh, let me think, fall 94, 95. It was probably right around 1996. One of the TV stations in Salt Lake City changed their set. And I was curious, and I said, well, what's the budget? And this is just your local news, just like WFSB Channel 3 or something like that. And the budget was $250,000 just for a set for local news. Now, you may say to yourself, well, why is it so expensive? Well, is it custom construction? Yeah. It's all custom construction. You can't just walk into Home Depot and buy one of these things. You have to have someone actually build every single piece. And so that's what adds to the cost. That's what adds to the cost. But anyway, I was talking to one of the designers at BDI, and he said, listen, it really goes through a process. So let's go ahead and look at this process together. The first thing he said that you do, the first thing is that there's a meeting, okay? He calls it the input meeting with the client. And so you have designers, you have executive producers, you might have a director involved, but you're sitting around in a conference room trying to figure out what is it that you're really trying to build here in this input meeting. What's the station's goals? What are the production needs? What's the budget? What's the timeline? All of those kinds of things are going to go into the ultimate design. All right? Then, the second thing is that floor plan. That overhead floor plan that I showed you. Okay? That's the top sheet in the handout, the overhead floor plan. This is sort of what it's going to look like from an overhead view. And this shows you your camera shots, traffic flow. It's really a way to figure out where the cameras go and what the cameras are going to see. Now, what I was told is that step 2 here, this floor plan is the one spot where it probably goes through the most changes. All right, so this is really the opportunity for changes, additions, modifications, that sort of thing. So, and he said it's not uncommon that a floor plan will go through multiple versions, 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, until they get it figured out, all right, until they get it figured out. And he said, you know, another thing that will happen with the floor plans is a lot of times they'll make multiple floor plans. A floor plan showing just the set, a floor plan showing just the lighting, a floor plan showing the set and the lighting together. Does that make sense? So he said, think of it like layers. Think of it like layers. So you would have your floor plan, and then a clear overlay of the lighting, and you can take it back and forth and sort of look at it like that. And so it's in this way that the design process moves forward. But number 2 here may include your lighting. All right, it may include the lighting. All right, it may include the lighting, and most often will. The third phase, once you've decided on your floor plan, the next phase of this is a presentation. So you fly back out to the client, wherever they are, St. Louis, Denver, and you're showing a lot of computer-aided design stuff. You're showing color renderings, what will the set look like, and they really start to concentrate now on color. All right, so this is the meeting. But the concentration on color, I think, is really interesting. Color, textures, and that sort of thing. Why would color be important? Why would color be important? You know, I like the design of the thing, but what color is it going to be? What texture is it going to be? Is it going to be made out of glass? Is it going to be made out of fabric? Okay, yeah, it has to do with quality. It has to do with quality, but it really also has to do with the medium. Certain colors look good on TV. Certain colors don't. Certain textures and fabrics and things tend to look good on television. Soft things, if you take a look at the psych, soft things tend to look pretty good. Things that are hard and shiny, does that look good on TV? Hard and shiny is bad because it reflects a lot of light. Okay, so we're trying to avoid reflection. We're trying to avoid reflection. Now that doesn't mean that you're never going to see something that's hard and shiny, but what they're doing here is they're trying to work with the medium. If you go to color, what colors look good on TV? And what colors don't? Well, typically, oversaturated color looks bad, no matter what color it is. All right, oversaturated colors tend to dominate, okay, and they also can tend to bleed out. But certain colors look good on TV, and you will see these colors used all the time. What's the color that you see the most on TV?
It's red.
Nope, it's not red.
See red and blue.
Blue. Blue actually translates the best. Greens, pastel colors, okay? Greens, pastel colors, browns, all right? The color that looks the worst on TV is actually red. Fire engine red, oversaturated red, does not translate very well. Now, does that mean you'll never see red? No, but it's just not your best. So fire engine red is not a really good TV color, all right? You also wind up avoiding pure black and pure white. Super high contrast does not translate well either. But we'll get into that a little more in a second. Once the contract is signed, the next thing, so number four here, the fourth thing is design approval, acceptance of the contract. All right, so approval, and then a contract is signed. So that's kind of a no-brainer. The fifth thing is construction, installation, installation, and lighting. And again, a lot of these companies offer lighting services. They offer lighting services because the lighting design is tied directly to the set design. Generally, what happens with this is that the sets are built wherever the company is located. So the sets would be built in New York, put in a tractor trailer in sort of modular units, and then shipped to St. Louis. And a team of installers would then go out to St. Louis for a couple of weeks to put the thing together. Does that make sense? So rather than building it locally. And then on-air premiere, lots of rehearsals. What does it look like? Any final tweaks? So the premiere or the rehearsal stage, rehearsals, to see what it looks like and whether any final adjustments need to be made. Sort of like you build the thing, you put it up, and then you go, okay, what do you think? Happy with it? Great. Give me $250,000. I'm out of here. Just kidding. But that's the process that it goes through. Yeah.
So when you look at the first page of the
Yeah.
thing, so if the news desk is over, I guess, more towards the right side, and then you look over to the left side, it says the chroma key. Like, why is it over there and not? Like, why do they even have one if it's not B?
Well, that's where the meteorologist would be giving their weather forecast from.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so on the left side where it says chroma key, that's where they'd be doing this effect that we talked about,
Okay.
right?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, but then they have a weather center, and if you guys have ever watched Connecticut, most of them have it. They have a weather center where they have their weather computers and whatnot, and so oftentimes they go to the weather center, and they do a shot there, and the meteorologist is simply standing there talking about what they're seeing. But then when they give the actual forecast, they move over to the chroma key wall, right? But then you see where the news desk is, and then you see, what else do they have here? An interview area, a subset. That's a subset. And so I'll explain more of this later, why, or in a minute, why they actually do these designs the way they do it. All right, so this is what BDI did. But let's go ahead and really think about this. You walk through the door and you, right off the bat, you have to decide where in the studio are you going to put your set. Where's it going to go? Where's the best place in a studio to build a set? And don't rely on BDI. Where's the best place to put a set?
I guess in the center.
You're absolutely correct. The very best place to put a set is right smack in the middle of the studio. Now you may be saying, well, why? That doesn't make any sense. The best place to put a set in the middle, why you put it in the middle, is that you have 360 degrees of possible camera angles.
Don't you want the camera to be like symmetrical too?
No, not necessarily. I have
Like a mount.
a complete circle, right? I can have my cameras anywhere. What about lighting? Do I have 360 degrees of lighting? Yes. So the very best place to put a set is right smack in the middle. But the problem, there's a big problem with that. If you put your set right smack in the middle of the studio, can you do anything else in your studio? Could you have a weather center somewhere? Could you have a subset in the corner for interviews or anything like that? No. You have pretty much used up the entire studio if you do that. Okay, so the next thing you go say to yourself is, okay, well, if I'm not going to use the middle or the center of the studio, maybe I can move it over against a wall. Maybe I'll move it against a wall. Okay, I have in this studio, I really have, what, 3 workable walls. I could put something there, I could put something there, or I could put something there, right? And then I could have, well, I could do my chroma key stuff over here. I could have the main news desk here, and maybe I could put my interview set over here, all right? And that would give me, it's a good use of the space. All right, more bang for your buck, as it were. But, is that a good idea? And the answer is, well, no, but the key thing that you guys have to do here is tell me why. Why is it a bad idea to put a set flat against a wall? You have to think visually. What have you done to your camera angles?
You can only use it that one way.
What?
It only comes in from like that one way.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things you've just done is you have created, do you have 360 degrees of camera angle? No, you've got what? A line, right? You have a line. That's it. You don't even have like 180 degrees, do you? A half circle? No, you've got what? Pretty much a line. Pretty much a line. Is that going to look good? No. What have you done with your lighting? All the lighting's going to have to be pretty much what? Dead on from one direction. Does that make sense? Is that going to look good? The answer is no. The reason that you don't do that is because you have to have room for backlighting. Backlighting, lighting from the back, is what offsets the subject from the background. That's a basic photographic lighting principle. Okay, you have to have some backlighting to push your subjects off the background. Doesn't have to be much, but it's got to be there. If you've got it flat against the wall, do you have room for that? No. If you have them too far back, you'd have light coming straight down. It would sort of be like a halo effect, right? And that's not going to work either. So what do? Well, one of the things that is unique to television, video, and film is what we call z-axis. Does anybody know what z-axis is?
Horizontal?
Nope. Depth. It's depth. Okay? So you got X and Y.
Like multiple layers.
Z is that way. Does that make? I can't draw it very well. I tried once and completely failed. But if you look at it online, you'll see some better graphics that show it. Ah, okay. Z-axis is depth. So in video and in film, we don't do a whole lot of side to side. But we do have this unique ability to work on the Z-line. All right? And so any type of camera blocking, any type of blocking for movement is typically done on the z-axis. Depth is the one thing that we have to work with. Well, let me ask you this. If you shove a news desk flat up against the cyc, what are you doing to z-axis? You're killing it, right? Imagine what that's going to look like on a TV screen. Is there going to be any depth at all? No, the eye is going to be simply what? It's going to be very flat. It's going to be very two-dimensional, right? It's going to be very two-dimensional. And so, what we do, rather than putting it right smack in the middle or putting it flat against the wall, what we do often is we try to work the corners. You try to work the corners, all right? And it's kind of obvious because there happens to be a big piece of carpet laid out right there. But think about it. That piece of carpet is laid out on a z-axis line straight into the corner. Does that make sense? And so if you really think about what the camera's going to see here, does the camera have some serious depth to work with? Yeah? Does the camera have almost 180 degrees to work with? And the answer is absolutely. You can have cameras as far over as here, right? They don't have to be all marched in a line. You can move your cameras in an arc, so you've got this 180 degrees of camera angle. And if you move your placement just a little bit out, you've got what? It's tight, but do you still have 360? You do. So set placement, we don't just walk in and just put stuff up. I mean, we think about this, okay? What is the nature of the medium. What are we dealing with when we're dealing with a camera? And so you have you ever seen someone pretending to be a Hollywood director and they do this? They go, "Oh, baby, you're fabulous. It looks great. Super." You ever seen someone, sort of a funny thing? Well, what are they doing? They're trying to see what it looks like through the camera, because it's not going to look like what it looks like with my regular eyes. I have to pretend to be a camera. What am I going to see as a camera? You have to pretend to be a camera. And so when I walk back here on my z-axis line and I pretend to be a camera, right? I'm happy with that. I'm happy with that. So, quick question. How many corners are workable in this studio? Well, I've got 1. I've got 2. I've got 3 workable corners. Yes? Do I still have my chroma key wall? Huh. Does this start to make sense? I'm really using my space in an efficient way, but I'm doing it in a smart way that's going to complement the medium. So I'm thinking about my cameras, I'm thinking about my lights. Always. Studios are designed to control light and sound, right? Light and sound, light and sound. So you're always thinking about this stuff, all right? Now, let's say we're going to build just an interview set. Let's say we're going to build an interview set, something really basic, just for 2 people. 2 people are going to talk to each other, okay? A host and a guest. All right, well, one of the first things that I do is I pick my corner, and then I throw down a piece of carpet. Now, you may be going, why? Why am I putting carpet down? Why would I put a piece of carpet down?
Soften the lighting and the audio as well.
Okay, it's going to soften up my lighting. Does it help to deaden out echo a little bit? Yeah, it's going to soften up my audio. Does it define my area of action? Yeah. Is it in the way of the cameras? No, because it's small enough, right? But remember, is it going to be in the shot? Almost never. You're going to be shooting over top of it. Unless you're doing a real wide shot from a high angle, you're not going to see the carpet. Now, sometimes what I do before I put the carpet down is I'll throw down risers. This is a type of set material that we sometimes use. It's called a riser. A riser is a platform. A riser is a platform. It's about 4 feet wide and about 8 feet long, because that's how plywood comes nominal from Home Depot. All right? But you build a riser out of things like plywood. It's about 8 to 10 inches high. It's about 8 to 10 inches high. And you lay down a few of these things, these risers, and then you throw the carpet on top of that. So essentially what you're doing here, folks, is you are elevating the set. Does that make sense? You're elevating it. Why? Why do I want it up off the ground? Why do I want it up off the ground? Yeah.
So the cameras aren't like angling down, they can get at eye level.
Now you're thinking like a camera. Good, good. If you're using regular chairs, regular furniture, and you put regular furniture down there, what's the camera angle going to be? Looking down. That's not what we want. What do we want? The ideal is eye level. The ideal is eye level. So if you're going to have your host and your guest sitting down in regular furniture, you're going to need to do what? Elevate them using risers. Does that make sense? Now, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to cheat because I'm lazy and risers are heavy. So you ready? rather than elevating my host and my guest using risers, I'm just going to get a few fancy little chairs here. I'll just use this. Ah. No risers, right? Smart? Sort of. Lazy? Yeah. Oh no, I've lost my other one. Where's my other one? Are you sitting on it? Get off your butt. I'll edit this out. I'm like, where is it? Where is it? He's sitting on it.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. So, here's a cheat, right? Here's a cheat. But remember how I was talking about colors and stuff and textures? I am making conscious choices. I'm making conscious choices. When we bought that piece of carpet, we actually were thinking about what color is it. Do you see how it's sort of a blue-gray and it's not very shiny? It has kind of a dull finish, right? Good thing. I said at some point, I said browns tend to look good on television. Browns. Wood tones tend to look good on television. Even blonde wood tones tend to look good on TV. Now you may be looking at this and going, well, this is a little bit hard and this is a little bit reflective. This is a little hard and reflective, Utterback. And I'm going to say, well, when I put a human being on that chair, are you going to see it? No, it's going to be blocked. Now if you look at the frame, you'll notice that this frame is not chrome. If you went to Walmart and tried to buy something like this, what's the likelihood that it would be chrome collared? Silver and highly reflective, right? This is painted gray. It's a little shiny, but it's dull enough. It's dull enough. So you're trying to avoid highly reflective surfaces. Make sense? All right. Now, so I need a place for my guest and I need a place for my host. I don't need to use risers, but where do I put my chairs? Front, middle, back, where do they go? And why? Don't just make some willy-nilly decision. I want to know why. Why? Why?
Would you put them in the middle just to like create some depth?
Okay, well, I'm glad that you're thinking about depth. I'm glad that you're thinking about depth. But the spot that we put them is not halfway. Halfway would be about there. Okay, that's about halfway. What I want to do is I want to maximize the space behind them. All right? I really want to maximize space behind them. So I'm going to put them, my talent positions, my primary positions typically are going to wind up at about 2/3. All right? At about 2/3. And so 2/3 is right about in here. 2/3 is right about in there. And I'm going to walk back out here. Every time I put a set piece down, I walk out, I turn around, I look at it, and I go, okay, good. Do I still have a good amount of depth in there? Yeah, if I push them too far back, danger, danger.
Would you put the chairs like kind of facing each other?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that. How would you position the chairs? Right now, they're just straight forward. Is this going to work? You're saying no. Why isn't going to? Why? That's going to be just fine, man. This camera's here. This camera's.
Like you just missed out on like the personal aspect of it.
Personal aspect. What do you mean?
Like they're supposed to be doing an interview, talking to each other.
they're actually supposed to be talking to each other,
Yeah.
right? Are they facing each other?
Not there.
So that's a problem. That's a problem, right? So, okay, cool. I got it.
You don't want that.
Well, this is perfect. They're talking to each other.
Some interviews are like that, right?
They're talking to each other. Anastasia, they're talking to each other.
They're like on a first date.
Okay, but why doesn't this work?
Because then you can't see their face.
Can't really get a two-shot.
You just get
I can get a two-shot.
Yeah, like that 180 like shadow though in their face and then like half their face.
Oh, I can, no, the lighting will be fine. I can do 3-point lighting or 5-point lighting on those guys with no problem. Triple key lighting. You can't see their face. And where's all the emotion in a human being?
What if they're ugly and you don't want to see their face?
What if they're ugly? Well, they wouldn't be in my sorority. I'll tell you that. Where is all of your emotion? It's in the face. And so you want to have a very clear shot of someone's face. In fact, what the camera allows you to do is to get closer to someone's face than you do in real life. That's the wonderful thing about the zoom lens, right? We can get in and really see what's going on with your face. That way I can tell whether you're lying or not about whether or not you use performance-enhancing drugs, Lance Armstrong.
So then like the make you have to be like the makeup artist has to be like aware of what's going on too because like if the girl or guy's foundation is not like a matte finish then like the camera light's going to reflect off of it and then you can't see.
Absolutely, yeah. My cousin Lori is a specialist in makeup for television and for film. She's been doing it for years. And absolutely, high definition close-ups, yeah.
So you have to like talk to the makeup artist as well and things like
That's right. Absolutely. It's a different ball of wax. Makeup for theater is very different than makeup for television, and even the differences between television and film, and the differences between television, film, theater, and rock and roll concerts. It's all different. So, you're right, this isn't going to work. So, what we typically do is we cheat them out at about 45 degrees. We cheat them out at about 45 degrees, just like this. And we're a little bit forward of that 2/3 line, but if you take and pretend that you're a camera, all right, do I have a nice clean two-shot? Yes, I do. Do I have a nice clean single shot right? Yup. Do I have a nice clean single shot left? Do I still have lots of good z-axis happening? Do I have some depth back there to work with? Do I still have 360 degrees of lighting? Could I, in fact, have an over-the-shoulder shot? Is it clean?
Why do you need space in the background though? Or like in the back? Like, are you gonna have cameras back there?
I'm not going to put a camera back there, but I might put something else back there.
The background?
Yeah, but there's a word for those things. Flats. A Duratran's a type of flat. But that's a good vocabulary word. That's awesome, Duratran. All right, so believe it or not though, if you're doing a basic interview show, believe it or not, you could stop right there. You could stop and leave it that simple. You could leave it that simple. In fact, some folks in the industry prefer overly simplistic sets. Okay, some people prefer sets that have lots of bells and whistles and lots of stuff going on, things to look at and whatnot. I tend to prefer simple, and here's why. There's an awful lot of research about this. If we have a TV show using a very simple setup, and you do a TV show, and then you take the audience and you give them a quiz, they're going to remember more of what was said okay? If you have a TV show with lots of stuff going on, and then you give a quiz at the end of the show, what do you think the recall rates are going to be? Higher or lower? A lot lower, significantly lower. And so some of us prefer this because when there's nothing else to look at on your TV screen, you actually start to pay attention and you actually start to listen if the content is interesting. How many of you guys have ever seen the TV show Inside the Actors Studio with James Lipton? It's down at NYU. It's a college class, okay, but James Lipton is essentially up on a theater stage and with a theater curtain behind him. There's a chair with a little tiny side table kind of a thing where he's got his notes and a glass of water. And then he's got another chair where his guest is going to sit. He happens to get movie stars and other actors and actresses that are interesting people to come in and talk, but there's nothing up there. There's nothing up there to look at. There's no whiz-bang. There's no lasers, okay? And what happens is that show will suck you in. You start to pay attention. You start to really listen to whatever it is Tom Cruise has to say, or whoever it happens to be, Dustin Hoffman or whatever, and you really start paying attention. And the next thing you know, you watch the whole show. Right? So, let's give an example of a TV show that has lots and lots and lots of stuff going on, but the content is very light. In fact, it's almost elementary school type content. I'm thinking of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. If you didn't have the darkened room and the lasers and the music, bing, bing, right? If you didn't have that, would that show fall on its face very quickly? Yeah, because it'd be boring as heck, right? Wouldn't it? If you really think about it, that show is very light on content. It'd be someone answering questions, and it'd be sort of really, really insanely boring, right? Okay. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. All right, now, another thing that I'll do, once I start to add things, let's say I want to add a few things. Once I start to add things, I'm going to use another visual principle, and it's the idea of a ramp. You build on a ramp. Foreground, midground, background. Your foreground is lower than your midground. Your background is higher. So you're building on a ramp, a visual ramp. Okay, so if you were going to add something in the back, it needs to be higher than what's happening with your chairs, right? If you want something in front, it needs to be lower. All right, so far, we're building completely symmetrically. So let's go ahead and continue with that. Hang on a sec. All right, the ubiquitous plastic plant. I want something in the foreground. Perfect. Okay, producers, yes or no? No, but why? Why? Oh, no, it'll be there. It'll get just part of it'll be there. What? What's wrong with that? It's out of place. It's bothering you. Is it bothering you? Okay, but you don't know why it's bothering you. The reason, number one, is that we have now hit a point where it is too symmetrical. What we are building is too symmetrical, okay? So there is a balance here between asymmetry and symmetry. Have we also blocked z-axis? Yes. And that's why it's bugging you. All right? So if I want this plant, all I got to do is move it off to the side, asymmetrical, asymmetrical, and it works. And you're not blocking your z-axis, and everybody's happy. All right? Now, if you want to screw it up again, take another plant and put it here. Imagine what that would look like if you had pretty much the identical plant and you put it on the other side. Are you now being too symmetrical? Yeah. So you've got this weird balance. And here's the thing, folks. You need to be able to put words to it. Why doesn't it work? How much television have you guys watched in your life? Hundreds and thousands of hours? Rely on your own instincts. Rely on your own instincts. This doesn't look good. I'm not sure why, but it doesn't look good. All right? Sometimes you'll be able to say, it doesn't look good because it's too symmetrical and I'm blocking z-axis. But other times you're going to look at something and go, I hate it, but I don't know why. Well, trust your instincts. And also don't forget to be the director. Walk yourself out here, take a look, check your camera shots. I'm liking it, I'm happy. Makes sense? Now, if you want to put something in the background, it needs to be higher. These are called flats. You have to be a little careful with flats. You don't want to injure yourself or others. You also really need to make sure that the flat is not going to fall on your talent.
Is the shadow okay?
What shadow?
The shadow on the flat of the chair.
Oh, down there?
Yeah.
Yeah, it won't be in the shot. Can you grab a sandbag, please? Because I don't want it to fall over either. It would be really bad in the middle of the interview if, like, the flat falls over on Oprah's head. You're fired. Thank you. Right? So if you're going to use a studio flat, sandbag it. Now, studio flats, a flat can be a single piece or it can be an entire construction. All right? It can be an entire wall. All right? So flats can be made out of just about anything you can think of. All right? Sometimes it's just a sponge painted, faux finished piece of hardboard. All right? But again, you have to think about color. What colors are going to work? What colors aren't going to work? Okay? What textures and patterns are going to work? What textures and patterns are not going to work? All right? And you don't want to overdo it and kill your z-axis. All right? You don't want to kill the z-axis. So if I was going to do an entire flat wall, a seamless flat wall, I would want to do something probably in a 180-degree arc. So I still would have some depth in there. I would not want to have just literally a flat wall behind them. Okay? Now, there are a lot of common variations on flat walls. A lot of times they build them with embedded LCD panels. All right? So that when you're looking past the set, you just see a bunch of LCD panels that are showing news from around the world or something like that. Another type of common, very common flat panel is what's called a Duratran. All right, and Duratran is an older trademark name, sort of like Kleenex or Xerox. And what a Duratran is a photograph that is printed on not glass, but some type of plexiglass, all right, plastic material that's translucent, and therefore it will allow light to pass through it. So oftentimes you'll get one of these Duratrans, and it'll be a photograph, a great big giant photograph. And then what you can do is backlight it. You can backlight it, all right, and they tend to look really nice. Probably the one Duratran that you guys are most familiar with. How many of you watched Letterman? You remember watching Letterman? He had a Duratran behind him. What was it? It was what? The skyline of New York City. It was the skyline of New York City. But it was a Duratran. They were in the Ed Sullivan Theater, like, I don't know how far underground, you know. But they had this really nice Duratran behind them. Okay. Duratrans, a lot of times you go to any city in the United States, you sit down, you turn on the news, and if you're in St. Louis, you'll probably have a Duratran of what? The Arch. You're in Phoenix, what's it going to be? A cactus? The Grand Canyon, right? The Grand Canyon. But more often than not, you're going to see some type of a photograph of the city skyline or something like that. But it gets really creative, and some of you are going to find this very offensive, but it's the honest truth. Do you guys know that TV show that was hosted by Howie Mandel? Maybe it still is. Deal or No Deal? You guys know the TV show Deal or No Deal? Is there a flat wall? Is there a flat wall in Deal or No Deal?
Is that the one where like they focus on the audience and they're like dressed up?
Money in the suitcases? Or numbers in the suitcases? What's the flat wall? No, it's a bunch of women. It's a bunch of women standing on risers. Are they good-looking women? And what are they doing? They're standing there with what? Briefcases. And their whole purpose in life is to do what? Open it. Yeah, sexist, offensive. Does it increase your ratings with men between the ages of 18 and 34? Probably. Or more. 18 to 49. It's a part of this. Those women are a part of the set. Do you understand me? They're a part of the set. Do you have to audition? I have no idea. But there it is. So, do you have any questions on the basics of this type of thing? I want to spend just a few more minutes talking about color, because what I'm going to say has to do with what people wear, and it also has to do with how you deal with makeup and things like that, okay? Certain colors look good on TV. We had already sort of gotten into this a little bit. Primary colors tend to look good as long as they're not overly saturated. So you can have a red as long as it's not overly saturated. Fire engine red's not going to look good, okay? Your blues, your blue grays, your green grays, all that stuff's going to look pretty good. Wood tones are going to look pretty good. Browns, every possible shade of brown is going to look fantastic on television. Other types of things, and this will translate also to skin tone. So folks that have brown skin tones tend to look fantastic on TV. Folks with my skin tone, this sort of northern Germany reddish, whitish thing happening, you're going to have to spray paint me with a lot of makeup, aren't you? Because am I a highly reflective surface? Yes, I am a highly reflective surface, and I know it. So, am I going to need makeup? A lot more makeup, yeah. Folks with that more olive tone skin, I'm thinking of the Mediterranean. I'm also thinking of South America, Brazil, Chilean skin tones. That more olive tone, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic on TV. The rest of us, unfortunately, are going to have to sit down and get spray painted, all right, because we're just too reflective. It also translates to your clothing. You don't want to wear highly reflective clothing, okay? It also translates to patterns. Television doesn't like high contrast. So high contrast stripes, the camera can't tell what's foreground and background, and it will start to flicker. That's called a moire effect. So if you're wearing a tie that has a super tight pattern on it, and it's a little bit shiny, you'll actually see it. The camera can't tell what's foreground and background. It'll start to flicker on the tie, all right? Or if you're wearing a suit coat, that's sort of the same thing. You would not want me to wear a black suit. Have you just created high contrast? Black and white, essentially white-red? Yeah, that wouldn't look good on TV. The opposite's also true. You wouldn't want someone with a darker skin tone to be wearing a white suit. It's not going to look good. All right? So high contrast is something to avoid. Super tight patterns, something to avoid. Big patterns, large block, like the stripes on your shirt, are perfect because they're nice and big. The camera's not going to have a problem with that. Does that make sense? Question?
Yeah, like anchors on the news, do they have some type of dress code or something?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Oftentimes they're given an allowance to buy the clothes. All right, especially at the upper ends, you know. Alex Trebek, for example, I don't think he's paid for a suit in years because they have an agreement with somebody in New York that supplies Alex Trebek with his suits. Does that make sense? You know, or Vanna White probably hasn't paid for a dress in I don't know how long because everybody's trying to get their clothing on Vanna, right? Vanna White's dress tonight was brought to you by Vera Wang or whatever. Does that make sense? They give the clothes away so that people see it, so this is really the basics. This is just the basics. It gets much more involved than this, but this is how it starts. This is how set design starts. Once you have a set built, the next task is to do what? Well, yeah, you fire up your cameras and you check it out, but the next step after that, lighting. And that's what we will do next time. We will start to talk about lighting. All right? Keep up with your readings, and I'll catch you on Monday.